They took out his heart. Completely. No transplant, no replacement, just a silent machine and a man who kept smiling. That's not science fiction. That's what happened to Craig Lewis, a man who lived without a heartbeat, who felt love without a pulse, and who died with more heart than anyone alive. But before that final breath, he held his daughter for the first time and whispered, "She has my second chance." This isn't just a story. It's a question. What really keeps us alive? Our heartbeat, or what we do with it? Subscribe now if you're ready to feel something real. There was no sound in the room, just a soft mechanical hum, constant and cold, like a refrigerator running in the dead of night. No heartbeat, no pulse, no rhythm of life. And yet, Craig Lewis was alive. Most people don't think about their heartbeat. It's just there, steady, familiar, the soundtrack of existence. But what happens when that sound disappears? Not because you're gone, but because your heart has been removed? This is not science fiction. It's not a futuristic medical experiment. It happened in 2011. In a quiet hospital room in Houston, Texas, Craig lay motionless on a hospital bed, his chest rising and falling with each breath, though there was no thump behind it. No echo in his ears, no flutter when he looked at the woman he loved. The doctors had taken his heart out, completely. In its place was a silent machine, a device that pumped blood continuously through his body without a single beat. Technically, one of the doctors would later say, "Craig is dead," but biologically, he's still here. His wife Laura sat beside him, gripping his hand like she was holding onto a memory. She had memorized the feel of his heartbeat over decades, how it would race when he laughed, how it slowed when he fell asleep beside her. But now, as she laid her head on his chest, there was only stillness, nothing, like resting against a stone. And yet Craig smiled. "It's strange," he said, "not to hear yourself anymore." The journey that brought Craig to this moment wasn't fast, it wasn't dramatic. It started quietly, like most things that change your life do. At first, he got winded walking up the stairs. Then he started feeling dizzy at work. He passed it off as getting older, working too hard, or just stress. Until the day he collapsed in his garage, Laura screaming his name while dialing 911 with shaking hands. They said his heart was failing, not partially, completely. He was given 12 hours to live, unless he tried something no one in the world had survived long-term before. A machine, no heart, just flow. When the doctor explained it, Craig didn't flinch. He looked over at Laura, at her eyes already full of tears, and said, "If I can stay just a little longer, I'll do it." But let's stop right there. This is not just a story about a medical miracle. It's not about technology or survival. It's a story about what it means to be human when the very thing that defines life, your heartbeat, is gone. Because even after the surgery succeeded, even after Craig opened his eyes and smiled that first tired smile, something was missing. Not just the muscle in his chest, but something deeper. When your heart is gone, can you still feel love? When your body is quiet, can you still feel alive? Craig was about to find out, before the hospital rooms, before the tubes and machines, before death came knocking at his chest. Craig Lewis lived a simple kind of life, the kind that slips through the cracks of memory, but builds a man's soul day by day. He was 55 when it all began, but for most of his life, Craig had been a quiet presence in the city of Houston. He was the kind of man neighbors liked to wave at from across the fence, a man who fixed his own car, paid his bills on time, and always had a bottle of cold beer waiting in the fridge. His house stood on a shady street lined with pecan trees that creaked in the Texas wind. He shared it with Laura, his wife of 27 years. They had built their life inside those walls, room by room, memory by memory. The smell of baked cornbread, the scratchy sound of old Johnny Cash records playing in the garage, and Laura's soft humming as she watered the hydrangeas at sunset. Craig had once told a friend that he measured happiness by quiet mornings. If you can drink coffee with the woman you love and not say a word for 10 minutes, and still feel understood, that's it. That's life. He worked as a systems engineer for an electrical supply company. It wasn't glamorous, but he liked the structure, the predictability, the calm. He liked order. Machines made sense to him. Wires, switches, current. You feed the system right and it keeps running. Simple. But people, feelings? That was Laura's department. They met in the most unromantic way possible, at a gas station. Her car had stalled. Craig, in his dusty jeans and sun-worn cap, walked over and offered to take a look. She said yes, though she was skeptical. When he opened the hood and pulled out a leaking hose with the confidence of a pit crew chief, she laughed. "You always carry spare hoses in your truck?" she teased. "Nope," he replied. "But I carry hope." It was a cheesy line. She rolled her eyes. But she didn't forget it, neither did he. Their love was the kind that takes time to notice and even longer to forget. They were different in many ways. Laura was warm, outspoken, and always 3 steps ahead emotionally. Craig was quiet, thoughtful, and loyal in ways that didn't always require words. They didn't have children, not for lack of trying. Laura had 2 miscarriages early in their marriage, both times late enough to feel the baby kick, and then not. After the second, she sat on the kitchen floor one morning, holding her hands over her belly, and whispered, "I think we're meant to love just each other in this life." Craig didn't answer right away. He just sat beside her, wrapped her up in his arms, and let her cry. He never brought it up again. But sometimes, late at night, Laura would wake and see Craig staring out the window, quietly humming a lullaby to no one. Still, they made a beautiful life together. They traveled once a year, usually by car, nowhere fancy. A weekend in Austin, a cabin in Arkansas. They loved antique stores, diners, and motels that smelled like the 1970s. They collected postcards but never mailed them. Craig had a shoebox full of them in the garage. One day he said, "We'll make an album." On Sundays, Craig played guitar. He wasn't very good, but he had a deep voice, smooth like warm syrup. He liked to sing old songs about trains, rivers, and hearts that didn't know when to stop loving. Laura always sat on the porch swing with a cup of iced tea, tapping her foot. Every now and then she'd shout, "Play the one that makes you cry." He'd roll his eyes, tune a little, and start singing "If Tomorrow Never Comes." And when he sang that line, "Would she know how much I loved her?" his voice always broke, just a little, because she did know, and he knew she knew. But something about saying it out loud, even in song, made it feel real all over again. That was Craig, sentimental when no one was looking, always listening, always remembering. He remembered the way Laura liked her coffee, half a teaspoon of sugar, no milk. He remembered which movie made her cry the most, Terms of Endearment. He remembered their anniversary, not because it was on the calendar, but because he kept a small worn ticket stub from the fair where they shared their first kiss. One time Laura asked him, "Why do you keep all these silly little things?" Craig looked at her, paused, and said, "Because one day I won't remember them, and I need something that does." But what Craig didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that memory wouldn't be the thing he'd lose first. It would be something deeper, something louder, the thing every moment in their lives had been built around, the thing that made every kiss, every tear, every song possible, his heart. That summer, Craig started feeling tired. Not just long day at work tired. Something deeper. He couldn't finish mowing the lawn without stopping twice. He got winded climbing the stairs. One evening, after dinner, he stood up, and the whole room tilted sideways. Laura caught him before he hit the floor. "I'm fine," he said. "Just lightheaded." "Craig," she whispered, "you haven't been fine in weeks." He promised to see a doctor. He didn't. Until one morning, as he reached for his toolbox in the garage, he fell, just dropped, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Laura found him seconds later, unconscious, lips slightly blue. She screamed his name, called 911, held his hand all the way to the hospital, whispering, "Stay, just stay." He stayed. But something in him had already begun to fade. The emergency room was a blur of sterile light and quiet chaos. Machines beeped in rhythmic codes only nurses understood. Somewhere, someone was crying. Somewhere else, a monitor flatlined. But in room 304, time stood still. Craig lay unconscious, tubes in his nose, wires taped across his chest, monitors surrounding him like watchful sentinels. Laura sat at his side, her hand locked around his, gripping it like a lifeline. His skin felt cold, not the kind of cold that goes away with a blanket, the kind that seeps from the inside, the kind that whispers something is shutting down. The doctor arrived with a clipboard and eyes that didn't blink enough. Dr. Patel, Indian American, late 42nds, the kind of calm that came from decades in the trauma bay. "Mrs. Lewis," he began, "your husband's heart is failing. Completely." Laura's lips trembled. "What does that mean?" "It means," the doctor said carefully, "his heart is no longer pumping blood efficiently. His organs are starting to shut down. If we don't intervene..." He likely won't make it through the night. She stared at Craig's face, his lips parted slightly, his chest rising slowly, mechanically. He looked asleep, but there was no peace in that stillness, only absence. "Is there a transplant available?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "No," he said. "There's a waiting list. It could take weeks, months. He doesn't have that kind of time." Silence fell like a sheet of ice. Then the doctor spoke again. "There is one option, experimental, radical, but it's the only shot he's got." Laura's eyes narrowed. "What kind of option?" Dr. Patel hesitated, then motioned toward the hallway. They stepped outside the room. "There's a device, elvad, left ventricular assist device. Normally it supports a weak heart, but in this case we'd take out the heart entirely, remove it, and the device would circulate blood using continuous flow, no beat, no pulse." Laura blinked. "You mean he'd be alive, but without a heartbeat?" "Yes, no pulse, no heartbeat, but alive." The words didn't make sense. How could anyone live without a heart? How could a machine do something so intimate, so powerful? Dr. Patel explained the basics. The elvad worked like a turbine. Blood flowed in and out, constantly, silently. There had been one successful trial, just one, but that man only lived for 5 days. "I won't lie to you," he said. "We've never tried this exact method long term, but Craig's strong. His body could accept it, and if it doesn't, he'll die. Quickly. But he's already dying. This is the only door left open." Back inside the room, Craig stirred. His eyes fluttered, then opened, slow, unsure. Laura leaned close. "Hey," she whispered, brushing his cheek. "You're still here." He tried to speak. Nothing came out. His lips moved like shadows. She brought water to his mouth, let him sip. Then he nodded faintly. Barely there. A nurse brought in a clipboard. Consent forms. Craig had to sign. The doctors had explained enough. The rest was a leap into unknown territory. Laura looked at him, her eyes filled with every emotion a heart can carry. "They want to take your heart out," she said, her voice trembling, "and replace it with a machine. No heartbeat, no pulse. But you'd still be here." "Maybe." Craig blinked slowly, processing the words. Then he reached for her hand, squeezed gently. "I don't need a heartbeat," he whispered. "As long as I can still see you." It was barely a voice, but it was him. And it was enough. Laura signed the papers. Craig traced his signature slowly, the pen dragging like a tired river. As they wheeled him away toward the operating room, Laura leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Stay. Whatever happens, stay." He didn't say anything, but she felt the smallest squeeze of his fingers, like a secret code only they knew. And then he disappeared behind the double doors. The operating room felt colder than usual. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the surgical team moved with synchronized precision. Masks, gloves, tools clinking softly on metal trays. But under the steady hands and calm tones, there was tension in the air, thick, unspoken. They were about to remove a man's heart and not replace it. Dr. Billy Cohn stood at Craig's side, his hands steady as ever. Beside him was Dr. Bud Frazier, a legend in cardiac innovation. Together they were attempting what had never been done successfully for more than a few days, to sustain a human life without a natural or mechanical heartbeat. Craig's chest rose and fell slowly beneath the anesthesia. Machines beeped and clicked, monitoring every detail. The moment came. Silence fell in the room as Dr. Frazier made the incision. Layers of skin and muscle were parted. Ribs spread. And then, the heart. It was swollen, failing, tired. "Let's begin," Cohn said. Over the next several hours, the surgical team worked methodically, removing Craig's heart piece by piece. Vessels were rerouted, tubes implanted. In place of the pulsing organ was now a pair of turbines, small, efficient, silent. The elvad system went online. The machine hissed softly, and blood began to flow, not in beats, not in rhythm, but in a continuous, seamless stream. There was no pulse, no thump, no sound of life, but the monitors stayed green, numbers stable. Craig was alive. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Nurses, doctors, even janitors whispered about the man with no heartbeat who hadn't died. Some called it a miracle, others, a strange kind of science. Laura just called it hope. Hours later, Craig was moved to recovery. Still unconscious, still alive. Laura waited beside his bed, staring at the man she loved, his chest rising and falling, wires still draped over his body like vines. She couldn't help it. She reached out slowly and rested her ear against his chest. Nothing. No rhythm, no warmth from within, only the faintest vibration of the machine doing its job. She pulled back, tears already forming. It felt wrong, like he was there. But something vital had been stolen. Craig stirred. His eyelids fluttered. "Craig?" she whispered, leaning in. He blinked groggy, then his eyes found hers. "You made it," she said, forcing a smile through tears. He tried to speak. His throat dry, cracked. She poured water into a cup, lifted the straw to his lips. He drank, then whispered, "No drums, no music." She laughed gently, though it broke something inside her. "You've still got a song," she said, "just a different beat." Later that night, a young resident entered the room to check Craig's vitals. She placed 2 fingers against his wrist, then frowned, tried again. Nothing. Alarmed, she checked his neck, then his chest. Still nothing. She ran to grab a doctor. Dr. Patel returned, calm as ever. "Elvad," he said with a smile. "No pulse. That's the point." The resident stared. "He's alive without a pulse?" "Yes," Patel nodded. "No heartbeat, but very much alive." Laura sat there, stunned all over again. How do you accept that someone can live without the very sound you've associated with life? That night she curled up in the hospital chair beside his bed. She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "Mine still beats," she whispered. "You can borrow it for a while." He didn't reply, already asleep, but his fingers tightened slightly around hers, just enough to say, "I hear it." Recovery was slow, the kind of slow that makes time feel like punishment. Days blurred into nights. Nurses came and went with measured steps and quiet hands. Laura barely left the room, except to shower and bring back Craig's favorite gum from the vending machine. Cinnamon, always cinnamon. Craig didn't say much at first. He was tired, groggy, disoriented. The first few days he stared at the ceiling more than he looked at her, and when he did speak it was clipped, short answers, hollow questions. "How's work?" "Fine." "You hungry?" "Not really." She tried not to take it personally, but even the strongest love can't help but bruise when touched too softly. Then came the night he asked her to close the blinds. "I don't want them looking at me," he said. "Who?" she asked. "Everyone." "There's no one there, Craig." He turned his face to the wall. Exactly. She didn't understand at first, but as the days passed she started to see the quiet war unfolding behind his eyes. It wasn't just the silence in his chest, it was the silence in his soul. No heartbeat meant no flutters when she walked into the room. No pounding when she kissed him. No racing pulse when her fingertips brushed his skin, and he noticed it, every time. One evening she reached out to kiss him. He turned his head away. "Don't," he whispered. She froze. "Craig, I can't feel it, Laura," he said, not looking at her. "Not the way I used to. You touch me and nothing happens." His voice cracked, not from volume, but from something worse, shame. Laura's throat tightened. She sat beside him, gently placing her hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said. "You're healing. You've been through hell." Craig shook his head. "It's not just that. I feel hollow. Like I'm not even a man anymore. Like I'm here but just running on wires." Laura bit her lip. He wasn't just talking about sex. He was talking about identity, about manhood, about the unspoken contract of being a husband, a protector, a partner. And now he felt like none of those things. She tried to comfort him, to remind him of everything they still had, but words didn't land like they used to. He would smile, nod, say he was fine, but the space between them stretched wider each day. Then, quietly, he moved into the guest room. He said it was because he didn't want to disturb her sleep, that the machine's noise was distracting, that the mattress hurt his back. But Laura knew better. It wasn't about comfort. It was about distance. Late at night she'd pass by the door and hear nothing. Not a snore, not a sigh. Just the low, constant hum of the device inside him. She cried more often now. Soft, silent cries in the bathroom where he couldn't hear. Not because he had changed, but because he thought he had become less. One morning she found him in the garage, standing motionless in front of the mirror mounted above the old workbench. Shirtless, just staring. She watched for a moment, unnoticed. His chest was scarred, a clean pink line running down the center. The machine's cable emerged from his abdomen, connecting him to a power source that hung by his side like a lifeline. He reached up and touched the scar, then pressed his palm flat against his chest. Nothing. Laura stepped forward. "Craig?" He turned sharply, startled. His eyes filled with something between apology and embarrassment. "I don't recognize myself anymore," he said quietly. She took a breath, walked up to him, and gently wrapped her arms around his waist. His body was cold, not lifeless, but still, unmoving. "You're still here," she whispered. "You're still mine." But even as she said it, she felt the ache of something missing. Not love, not connection, rhythm. And rhythm, she realized, had always been their language. It was on a Wednesday night, around 11:30 p.m., that Laura found the letter. She had gone into the guest room to collect laundry, thinking Craig had already fallen asleep. The machine by his bedside pulsed its constant steady hum, like wind through a tunnel. But the bed was empty. A small lamp glowed in the corner, and on the pillow there was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, folded once. Her name written on the outside in slow, careful handwriting. Laura unfolded it with trembling hands. "Laura, I don't know how to say this to your face. I don't think I have the right words left in me. I know you've been trying. I see it every day. In the way you sit beside me even when I don't speak. In the way you smile even when I give you nothing to smile about. But I can't keep pretending I'm still the man you married. I look in the mirror and see a shell. I don't feel the things I'm supposed to feel. I don't wake up with that urgency in my chest anymore. Not for life, not even for you. And that terrifies me. It's not because I don't love you. It's because I do. And I don't want you to spend the rest of your life loving half a man. If I could take this machine out and leave on my own terms, I would. But that decision isn't mine to make, not anymore. So if I start pulling away, just know. It's not because I stopped loving you. It's because I want you to be free to love someone who can actually love you back the way you deserve. I'm sorry. Craig." She sat down on the edge of the bed, the letter open in her lap, eyes brimming with tears that refused to fall. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Then she stood up, wiped her face, and walked silently to their bedroom. From the top drawer of the dresser, she pulled out an old flannel shirt, Craig's favorite. It had a tear under the sleeve and buttons that never matched. He used to wear it every weekend, saying it made him feel like himself. After the surgery, he never touched it again. She spent the next 2 hours at the kitchen table, thread and needle in hand, heart pounding not with fear, but with clarity. By morning, the sky outside was soft gray. Craig returned from his solitary walk, something he'd started doing late at night when sleep refused to come. He moved slowly, like a man who wasn't sure he belonged in his own life. When he stepped into the kitchen, he froze. The shirt was folded neatly on the table, a note placed on top. "You are still you. Love doesn't need rhythm, it needs presence. Try it on." He unfolded the shirt, confused. That's when he saw it. On the inside of the collar, stitched in Laura's looping hand with dark blue thread, were the words, "I still hear you, even in silence." Craig stood there, staring. His hands trembled as he picked up the shirt. For a few long seconds, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he slid his arms through the sleeves and buttoned it closed. It hung loose on his thinner frame, but somehow, it felt like armor. He looked in the hallway mirror. He didn't look like a ghost. He looked like Craig Lewis. Laura entered the room, holding a cup of coffee. He turned to her, eyes red but clear. "You did this?" he asked. She nodded. "I was never in love with your heartbeat, Craig," she said. "I was in love with the man who would give it up, just to stay." He didn't say anything at first, just stepped forward and pulled her into a long, still embrace. No rhythm, no flutter. But Laura could feel the weight of him, solid, present, alive. And for the first time in weeks, Craig felt something stir inside him. Not the mechanical hiss of the elvad, not the whisper of electricity, but a warmth, faint, familiar, like the beginning of music. A few weeks after the morning Craig wore the flannel shirt again, something shifted between them. Not dramatically, not like in the movies where love comes rushing back with orchestras and fireworks. No, it was subtler than that. The way Craig lingered longer in the kitchen, standing close as Laura made coffee. The way his hand began to reach, without thinking, for hers while they watched the evening news. The way silence between them began to feel like music again. But underneath the quiet progress, something else was changing. In Laura, it started with a flutter of dizziness one morning. She dismissed it, blamed it on stress, on lack of sleep. But then came the nausea, the sudden sensitivity to the smell of garlic, the aching tenderness that bloomed across her chest one rainy Tuesday. She didn't say anything to Craig at first. Hope was a dangerous thing. She had carried it twice before, both times to heartbreak. She hadn't even considered it possible anymore. The doctors had said her chances were almost non-existent at her age, especially after what her body had endured. And yet, on a Thursday morning, while Craig sat on the porch sipping coffee, Laura stood in the bathroom, barefoot, staring down at a plastic stick in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Positive. Her breath caught in her throat. Tears came, not of joy, not of fear, something deeper, something ancient, a mixture of love, grief, memory, and miracle. She sat down on the closed toilet lid and whispered, "No way." But it was there, undeniable. Later that day, she made an appointment at the clinic. She didn't tell Craig, just said she needed to check on some blood work from her last physical. He kissed her on the forehead, told her to drive safe. At the clinic, the ultrasound room was small, sterile, and dimly lit. The nurse smiled gently as she moved the probe across Laura's belly, and then, there it was, a tiny flutter on the black and white screen. A heartbeat. Laura covered her mouth with her hand. It wasn't loud, just a soft, rhythmic thump-thump, thump-thump echoing through the speakers. But it filled the entire room. The nurse, sensing the moment, asked softly, "Would you like a recording?" Laura nodded. She left the clinic with a small flash drive in her purse. She didn't know what she'd do with it yet. She only knew that the sound on that file was more than just a medical recording. It was proof. Proof that something inside her still worked. That after everything, the miscarriages, the grief, the long years of silence, her body had remembered how to hope. That night, Craig sat at the dinner table, absently flipping through an old guitar magazine. Laura placed a bowl of soup in front of him, then sat across from him, staring without speaking. He looked up. "What's wrong?" She smiled softly. "Nothing's wrong." But she didn't say anything else. She couldn't, not yet, because it wasn't just her secret. It was theirs. And soon, she would find the right moment to let him hear what she had heard. To let him feel a heartbeat again. Just not his own. 3 days later, the rain returned. Houston was good at that. Soft, persistent storms that made everything feel heavier. Craig sat on the front porch with a blanket across his lap, listening to the quiet drip of water off the gutters. He had a book open but wasn't reading. The pages turned slowly, more from habit than attention. Laura stepped outside and stood in the doorway, watching him. There was something fragile about the way he sat, like a man still trying to find his shape in the world. She had spent the whole day replaying the heartbeat file. Over and over again, the soft, rhythmic flutter, barely louder than a whisper. It sounded like a secret. Now, as the storm wrapped around their home, she slipped something small into her coat pocket and walked over to him. "Hey," she said softly. He looked up. "Hey, do you mind if I sit? You never have to ask." She sat beside him. For a moment, they just listened to the rain. Then slowly, Laura pulled a small recorder from her pocket. It was old, the kind with real buttons and a tiny red light. Craig looked at it curiously. "I want to play you something," she said. He hesitated. "What is it?" "Just trust me." She pressed play. At first there was nothing, then through the soft static came the sound. Thump-thump, thump-thump, thump-thump. Craig blinked, his body tensed slightly. He looked at Laura. "What is that?" She didn't speak right away. Her hand found his. "That," she said, her voice trembling, "is our baby's heartbeat." Silence fell. Not the kind of silence that comes from absence, the kind that comes from too much emotion, all at once. Craig stared ahead, eyes wide. His lips parted but no words came, only breath. He looked down at her belly, then back at her face. "You're..." Laura nodded, eyes shining. "We didn't plan it. I didn't think it was even possible anymore. But it's real. I heard it. I saw it." She squeezed his hand. "And now, so have you." Craig turned his head away for a moment. His shoulders trembled. At first, Laura thought he was laughing. Then she realized he was crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness, the kind that comes from remembering what it means to feel again. He covered his face with one hand, and with the other, he reached for the recorder, holding it close to his chest. "It's the first heartbeat I've felt in months," he whispered, "and it's not mine." Laura leaned her head against his shoulder. "You may not have a heartbeat anymore," she said, "but that doesn't mean you stopped creating life." They sat there like that for a long time. The rain softened. The world went quiet again. But inside them, in the center of everything, something new had begun to grow. Not just a child, but a future. For the first time in months, Craig started waking up before the alarm. There was no heartbeat to stir him from sleep, no pounding in his chest when dreams got too deep. Just the gentle hum of his device and a growing energy that didn't come from his body, but from something deeper. Purpose. It began quietly, the way most revolutions do. A former colleague at the hospital, Dr. Sanchez, had asked Craig to speak at a small support group for heart failure patients. Just 5 or 6 people in folding chairs, in the corner of a conference room. Craig showed up wearing that same old flannel shirt, the one Laura had stitched for him. He stood awkwardly at first, hands in pockets. Then he spoke. "My name is Craig Lewis," he began, "and I don't have a heartbeat." There were a few chuckles, a few raised eyebrows. Then silence. "But I do have a life," he continued, "and I didn't come here to give you medical advice. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a preacher, I'm just a guy who had to decide whether I wanted to die as a man with a heart, or live as a man with something else." The room leaned in. He told them everything. The collapse in the garage, the terrifying decision, the emptiness afterward, the quiet, the doubt, the baby. And by the time he finished, 3 people were crying. One was clapping, the others just sat there stunned. He hadn't realized his story had weight until it fell into someone else's lap. Word spread. By spring, Craig was speaking once a week, then twice. Then he was invited to share his story at a medical conference in Dallas. A podcast followed, then a short article in a cardiology journal, eventually, a TEDx talk. Each time, his message stayed the same. "I have no pulse, but I have no limits." He began calling it Pulseless Purpose, and it wasn't just a phrase, it was a truth. A reminder that what defines life isn't the noise in your chest, it's what you do when the noise is gone. Laura watched it all happen like someone witnessing the bloom of a flower she thought had died. The man who once stood silent in front of a mirror, mourning his masculinity, now stood on stages across the country, microphones clipped to his collar, wires running under his shirt like lifelines, proud, confident, alive. And yet, every night, he came home to her. He always came home. One afternoon in late July, they stood in the nursery together, folding tiny clothes. The walls were soft yellow. A mobile of stars spun lazily above a crib neither of them had dared dream about before. Craig held up a onesie. "Too small," Laura laughed. "It's for a newborn." He tilted his head. "Still looks illegal." They were building a future, one drawer at a time. That same week, Craig finished writing his first book. The title was simple, Living Without a Heart. It wasn't a medical manual. It was a memoir, a love letter, a map through the wilderness of silence. The last line of the book read, "A heart may stop beating, but love doesn't." He dedicated it to Laura, and to the heartbeat that brought mine back. A month later, on a warm Sunday afternoon, Hope Lewis came into the world. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, screaming. Healthy. Perfect. Craig wasn't allowed in the OR, but he stood just outside the door, pacing like a man waiting for oxygen. When the nurse brought her out, swaddled and sleepy, he broke down. He held her in his arms, and for the first time in years he felt weight in his chest, not a thump, but something heavier, something eternal. Laura looked over from the bed and whispered, "She has your eyes." Craig looked down. "No," he said. "She has my second chance." That night, while Laura slept and the baby snored in a bassinet beside her, Craig sat by the window and pulled out the old recorder. He pressed play. Thump, 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 thump. And though his own chest remained silent, his heart, what mattered of it, was louder than ever. It started with a letter, handwritten, shaky, on ruled notebook paper, with smudged corners and uneven lines. It arrived at the hospital where Craig had recently spoken to a room of heart failure patients and young medical interns. The envelope was addressed simply to Mr. Craig Lewis, the man without a heartbeat. He opened it that evening in his kitchen. Laura was bathing Hope in the next room, humming softly, her voice just audible over the splashes of water. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Lewis, my name is Jason, and I'm 13. I have something wrong with my heart too. I was born with it. The doctors say it's gotten worse. I've been on a waiting list for a new one for over a year. My mom says there might not be a match in time. But I saw your video online, the one where you say you don't have a heartbeat but you're still here. Is that really true? Because if it is, maybe I don't have to die. Could you write me back? Or maybe visit me? I'd really like to meet someone who doesn't give up. Your friend, I hope, Jason." Craig didn't move for a long time after reading it. He stared at the paper as if it were a mirror, one reflecting his own 13-year-old self, afraid, unsure, wanting to believe there was something after the fear. He didn't hesitate. The next day, he called the number listed on the envelope. Jason was being treated at a children's hospital just 40 minutes away. Craig made the drive in silence. No music, no distractions, just the sound of rain on the windshield and the soft mechanical whisper of the device keeping him alive. When he arrived, a nurse led him to the pediatric cardiology wing. Bright walls, cartoon murals, shelves of books no one read. Children weren't meant to be here, especially not like this. Room 212. He knocked gently, then opened the door. Jason sat upright in bed, propped by pillows, thin, pale. His arms lined with tape and tubes, but his eyes lit up when Craig stepped in. "You came," the boy said, almost in disbelief. Craig smiled. "You asked." Jason looked him over. His gaze landed on the small cable emerging from Craig's side, disappearing under his shirt. His eyes widened. "Is that it?" Craig nodded. "That's the one. You really don't have a heartbeat?" Craig stepped closer. "Want to see something weird?" He reached out and took Jason's hand, placed it gently on his chest. Jason waited, his brow furrowed. "There's nothing." Craig winked. "Told you, I'm basically a superhero." Jason laughed, a sound half cough, half joy. "How does that even work?" Craig sat down beside him. "It works because I wanted it to, because I chose to keep going even when everything inside me told me I was already gone." Jason looked down at his own chest. "I'm scared," he whispered. "I was too. They say if I don't get a heart soon." Craig didn't interrupt. Jason continued, "I'll be out of time." Craig leaned forward. "You wrote to me because you wanted proof that it's possible to keep living when everyone says it's over." Jason nodded slowly. Craig reached into his jacket and pulled out the recorder, the same one Laura had used. He pressed play. Thump thump, thump thump. Jason looked confused. "Whose heartbeat is that?" "My daughter's," Craig said. Jason blinked. "You have a kid?" "Yup. She saved my life, and she hasn't even learned to talk yet." The boy smiled faintly. Craig stood. "I'm coming back next week. If you want, we can talk again. Or just sit. Or you can ask me anything. Deal?" Jason nodded, a little stronger this time. "Deal." As Craig walked out of the room, he didn't feel like a man without a heart. He felt like someone who had just loaned his to someone who needed it more. 2 weeks passed, and Craig visited Jason every few days. They talked about everything, from baseball cards to video games to the unfairness of hospital jello. Jason had a sharp wit and a quiet sense of humor, but beneath the jokes was a boy who had learned to live with ticking clocks and unfinished hopes. Then came the call. It was 2:18 a.m. Craig's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Lewis?" The voice on the other end was strained. "A nurse. Jason's taken a turn. He's in ICU. They don't know if he's going to make it through the night." Craig was out of bed before she finished. He didn't even change clothes, just threw on his coat, grabbed the recorder from the drawer, and ran out the door. The roads were empty, except for the rain. It poured in sheets, streaking the windshield like tears. Craig drove fast, his knuckles white on the wheel, heartless chest pounding with something other than rhythm. When he arrived, the ICU lights were dim and solemn. Jason's room was filled with machines and urgency. His skin was pale, almost translucent. Oxygen mask, IV lines, a flat, shallow rise and fall of his chest. His mother stood at the bedside, her face hollow. She looked up as Craig entered. No words, just a silent plea in her eyes. A doctor pulled Craig aside, whispered what Craig already feared. "We're losing him. He needs a miracle. Or a match. And there's neither." Craig looked through the glass at the boy who had once asked him, "Do you really not give up?" Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the recorder. He stepped inside the room, nodding gently to the mother. She stepped aside. Craig sat beside the bed, placed the recorder gently on the mattress. "Hey, Jason," he said softly, not caring if the boy could hear. "You asked me once if it was true, if a man could keep going without a heartbeat. I told you yes." He clicked play. A soft, pulsing sound filled the room. Thump thump, thump thump. Craig leaned in. "That's you, buddy. From the first day we met. Remember, they recorded it during your exam. You said it sounded like a baby bird flapping its wings." A small monitor beeped. Jason didn't open his eyes. But Craig kept talking. "You don't have to give up, kid. You've got something inside you stronger than a heart. You've got fight. You've got stubbornness. You've got presence. I know what that feels like, because I had to borrow it too." The recorder kept playing. Thump thump, thump thump. Jason's hand twitched. The nurse noticed. So did the doctor. Craig didn't flinch. "That's it," he whispered. "Come on." Another twitch. A small movement in the monitor's waveform. A pulse. Jason's mother gasped. Craig reached over and took Jason's hand, placed it against his own chest, where nothing beat, nothing moved. "Feel that?" he said. "There's no drum in there, but I'm still here, so can you be." And Jason, slowly, weakly, opened his eyes. Tears rolled silently down Craig's face. The boy tried to speak but couldn't. His lips formed a shape. "You stayed." Craig nodded. Always. The first sign was subtle. Craig had always been meticulous about cleaning the driveline site, the small opening in his abdomen where the cable exited his body. Every morning, like clockwork, he'd sit by the bathroom sink with antiseptic wipes, sterile gauze, and that quiet patience he applied to everything in life. But one morning, Laura noticed something strange, a faint redness, a bit of swelling, nothing dramatic. Just enough to make her stomach clench. "Did it hurt when you cleaned it?" she asked. Craig shrugged. "A little. Probably just irritated." But by the end of the week, the irritation had turned into a slow, dull ache. The skin around the site grew warm. Laura called Dr. Patel without asking Craig. They were seen the same day. The test results came back the next morning. Craig was sitting on the porch with Hope asleep on his chest when Laura stepped outside, phone still in hand, face unreadable. He knew. "They found something?" he asked. She nodded. "Infection," she said. "Deep tissue. They're worried it's spreading." He didn't speak right away, just looked down at Hope. Her tiny fists curled against his shirt, her breath steady, her weight so impossibly light. "What are the options?" he asked. "They want to try IV antibiotics, strong ones, but they said it's aggressive, and if it reaches the bloodstream," he looked up, "then that's it." She sat beside him, gently took Hope into her arms. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said quickly. "We'll fight it, like before. We've done impossible things, Craig." He smiled. "I don't think this is one of them." Her eyes flared. Don't say that, but he wasn't giving up. Not really. He was choosing how to go. Not in a hospital bed with machines pushing his blood through plastic tubes. Not surrounded by strangers in scrubs. Not under a ceiling of cold lights. But here, with them. That night, Craig wrote 3 letters. One for Laura. One for Hope, to be opened on her 18th birthday. And one for Jason. He tucked them into a box with the flannel shirt, the recorder, and the worn postcard he never mailed from the fair where he kissed Laura for the first time. Then he joined her in the living room, where she was rocking Hope to sleep. "You still remember that night at the gas station?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, caught off guard. "Of course. I had no idea what I was doing under that hood. I just didn't want you to drive away." She laughed, tears already forming. "Well, you've always been good at faking confidence." He nodded. "I've been faking it a lot lately." She didn't respond. He stepped closer, took her hand. "I want to be here, Laura. I want to see her first steps, her first day of school. But if I can't, I want to leave while I still feel like myself." She squeezed his hand. "But you are yourself." He looked at her then, long and quiet. "That's because of you." The end came quietly. There was no panic, no monitors screaming into the silence, no crash carts or overhead codes, just the soft sound of a baby's breath and the low murmur of wind outside their bedroom window. Craig spent his final day exactly the way he wanted to. He held Hope for hours, letting her tiny hands wrap around his thumb, smiling at the way her nose wrinkled when she yawned. He read to her from a battered old storybook, his voice low, even, steady. Laura sat nearby, watching the two of them like someone memorizing a sunset. That evening, he asked for something simple. "Play the recording one more time," he said. Laura didn't ask which one. She already knew. She retrieved the little black recorder, the one that had followed them through every turning point, and hit play. Thump thump, thump thump. Craig closed his eyes. "She saved me," he whispered. "Before she was even born." Laura kissed his forehead. "She's going to grow up knowing that." Later, as the sky dimmed, Laura helped him into bed. Not the hospital bed they'd been offered, their bed. The one they had shared for 27 years. The one where they had whispered dreams, fought over pillows, made promises and memories in equal measure. He lay on his back, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. "Will it hurt?" Laura asked softly. Craig turned his head, offered her a tired smile. "I don't think so. I think it'll just get quiet." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I'm not ready." "You don't have to be," he said. "Just be there." So she climbed into bed beside him. Hope lay sleeping in the bassinet, and together, without sound, they watched the sky outside turn from dusk to deep night. At 2:47 a.m., Craig took his last breath. There was no jolt, no gasp, just a long, slow exhale. Laura didn't cry right away. She just lay there, her hand in his, memorizing the feel of it, knowing that soon, even that warmth would fade. She stayed like that until sunrise. Then she rose quietly, picked up the envelope marked Laura, and walked out to the porch where they'd shared so many mornings. The sky was soft orange. Birds chirped faintly. The world, as it always does, kept turning. She opened the letter. Laura, if you're reading this, then I've finally run out of borrowed time. Don't be sad too long, please. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it matters too much. You were my rhythm when mine stopped. You were my breath when I forgot how to take one. You gave me more life than any heartbeat ever could. Tell Hope that her dad was a man who left quietly, but loved loudly. And when she misses me, which I hope she won't too often, play her that sound. Not the one in the recorder, the one in your voice when you say her name. That's where I'll live. Always, Craig. She folded the letter, pressed it to her chest, and closed her eyes. No heartbeat echoed in the silence, but she could still feel him. Everywhere. The funeral was small. Craig wouldn't have wanted anything else. Just a gathering of those who truly knew him, who had seen past the machine, past the miracle, into the quiet, steady soul that had held them all together. It was held beneath a wide oak tree on a hill just outside Houston. The sun broke through the clouds in soft streaks, like a final gesture of grace. There were no suits, no formalities, just stories, laughter through tears, and a silence so complete it felt sacred. Jason stood up to speak. He was taller now, stronger, his skin no longer pale, his voice no longer shy. A scar peeked out from beneath his collar, evidence of the elvad implanted months earlier, evidence of the life Craig had helped save. He looked out at the small group gathered beneath the tree. His eyes found Laura, holding baby Hope on her lap. Then he looked down at the paper in his hand. He didn't need it. I met Mr. Craig Lewis when I thought I was going to die, he began, a pause. But he didn't save me with surgery. He didn't fix me with medicine. He sat next to me and let me feel silence, and told me it was okay to be alive inside of it. He held up a small object, the black recorder. This machine played me my own heartbeat. He said it was a reminder that I was still here, but he also told me that even when your heart stops making noise, it doesn't stop meaning something. He turned toward the casket. Simple wood, no flowers. Craig was the only man I've ever known who could live without a heartbeat and still leave one behind. He placed the recorder gently on top of the casket. The wind carried the last thump-thump across the quiet hill. Later, as the sun dipped low and the mourners trickled away, Laura stayed behind. Hope sat in the grass beside her, now a toddler, hands full of petals she kept trying to throw at squirrels. Laura looked down at her daughter, then up at the sky. "Want to hear a story?" she asked softly. Hope nodded. So Laura told her about a man who once gave up his heart to stay alive. A man who lived without rhythm, but loved in perfect time. A man who taught people that being human was never about the beat in your chest, but about the space you made for others inside of it. When she finished, Hope reached out and touched Laura's chest. "Does your heart sound like Daddy's did?" Laura smiled. "No, sweetheart," she said. "Daddy's heart didn't sound like mine, but it loved the same way." That night, after Hope fell asleep, Laura sat on the porch, just like she and Craig had done so many times before. The stars blinked quietly overhead. The wind moved through the trees like a sigh. She took out one last postcard from the box Craig had left behind, the one he had never mailed. It showed a quiet lake at dusk. On the back, in Craig's handwriting, "I never sent this because I didn't know what to write. Turns out, I didn't need to. You were always the message." She placed it beside the recorder, then whispered into the night, "You were always the heart." And in that moment she felt it, not a beat, not a sound, but something warm, something whole, something that stayed. To anyone listening now, you may not face the same choices Craig did. Your heart may be beating strong, or maybe it's broken, maybe it's tired. But the question is the same: what makes a heart matter? Is it the sound it makes, or the lives it touches when it finally goes quiet? We'll let you answer that. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone you've lost, or someone you still hold on to, tell us. Tell them. Because hearts don't echo forever, unless someone chooses to listen. Maybe you've never lived without a heartbeat, but maybe you've lived through loss, through silence, through moments where you weren't sure what kept you going. Craig's story isn't just about science, it's about choosing to keep loving, even when your heart is broken, even when it's gone. So here's a question for you. What's the one thing or the one person that keeps your heart alive? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to read your story. And if this video moved you, inspired you, or made you stop and think, hit that subscribe button. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we listen to hearts.